One of the things I always find a little bit surprising about some religious people is how important to them the literal truth of some of their claims seems to be to them. You know, I mean, there are some biblical literalists, isn't there, who would say that every word of the Bible is true, you know, right the way through from Genesis to Revelations and Noah's flood and the talking donkey, the Garden of Eden, the whole thing. Time scales supposedly put forward by Bishop Ussher. Literally true, and they have to be literally true, because if some parts of it aren't literally true, then the other parts of it can't be literally true. That seems to be the sentiment. I don't understand that at all. And even if they're not completely, you know, some folk who are not perhaps as literal minded as that, quite often still attest that whilst a lot of the Bible in this case might be metaphorical or might be, you know, full of instructional stories, allegories, parables, that kind of thing, even they will often say, yeah, there's some things which are literally true. The resurrection, for example, the virgin birth, literally true. That isn't true for a lot of folk. I know some people, including, you know, high up Anglicans in the country where I live, high up church people in the country I live, are happy to accept that the whole Bible is parable and analogy and myth. But certainly on YouTube, that would be, I don't know, you'd be an apostate, I think, if you claimed that. This makes most of the leading clergy in my country atheists or apostates by that reckoning, but I don't know, it's not. I mean, to me, it's a little bit like this idea, you know, this attachment to the literal. It parallels what you don't see in science, but if it was parallel in science, it would be a little bit like being obsessed with facts. Obsessed with facts, because scientists aren't obsessed with facts. It's important that, you know, that the facts are correct. But if one or two facts turn out not to be correct, it's not the end of the world, because you're not really after facts, you're after theories. And by theory, of course, I mean the explanatory system which joins all the facts together and gives predictions and allows you to find points of consilience between one phenomenon and another, and gives patterns and understandings of the patterns of the way the world works. I mean, those are the things you're after, theories, not facts. And theories are really abstract. You know, there's nothing literal about a theory. It doesn't work in that way. It's a different level of understanding. And I think that kind of system should apply, I would have thought, you know, to religious texts. I just live down here, by the way, in this village. I'll just point to it just so you can get yourself oriented. I live down there. And occasionally the Jehovah's Witnesses come around. It's funny, actually, because they used to come around where I used to live in Cheshire, which is 350 miles north where I am now. And there's two people come around here again. They found me again. Perhaps there's a secret network of Jehovah's Witnesses. But they're really nice. One of them, Mike, he lives in the village, so I see him around sometimes. But they are biblical literalists. You know, and the Watchtower and the Awake, the journals that they give out, they've got pictures of the Ark and they've got pictures of Eden. They seem completely literal. And I did have a conversation with Mike about that. I said, why are you so obsessed with this stuff being literally true? You know, it's like you've got the keys to the kingdom of metaphor and story and analogy and myth, which you know, just like theory in the world of science, is the thing that, you know, gives explanatory power. You know, beyond individual facts, beyond the literal truth, you've got access to the allegories, the big stories, which a lot of people choose to live their lives by. Isn't it more interesting to, you know, recognise that you don't operate just at the level of the literal. The literal is that which passes by. I mean, isn't that what Christians say? That all this will pass away, and what we should really be interested in is the eternals and the spiritual truths, that kind of thing. So I feel like saying, and do say to Mike, you know, why are you concerned with the literal truth of this story, when what this story could be for you and for the rest of us is a set of myths? And but myths have got such a bad name now, you know. It's, at least in vernacular circles, if something's called a myth, people often just think that means, I can dismiss that then. It's not true. It's fiction. It's like Harry Potter or the stories of Hercules. It's just a myth, you know. But myths aren't supposed to be true, in the same way that theories aren't supposed to be factual. They're supposed to be, you know, the big stories, as I say, that explain lots of things, if you let them. And and they're open to a bit of interpretation, and they're supposed to be open to interpretation. They're a bit of a Rorschach blot, you know what I mean, for the world in which we live. And really good religious stories should be like that. And if you take that approach, even to the Bible, personally I would have a kind of multi-denominational approach myself and look at different myths. But if the Bible is your chosen text, taking it as a powerful myth, one that has, as I say, explanatory power for the stories of how individuals relate to the world and to one another and all those kind of things, then you don't have all those embarrassing explanations to have to make about slaves, do you? Or about people being crucified and cruelty. Because those things can happen in myth. Because myths aren't about real people, they're about archetypes and symbolic characters taking the place of certain things that we want to talk about, ideas. So all those ridiculous conversations about, yeah, do you really believe in a talking snake? Religious people could avoid all that by saying, of course I don't literally believe in a talking snake. That doesn't make any sense. It's an allegory, it's a myth, a really, really important myth. Let me share the myth with you and see if you find it interesting. Anyway, that's what I said to Mike, but he wasn't buying it. He gave me his copy of Awake in the Watchtower with a picture of Noah's Ark in it. Said, yeah, the world literally flooded 4,000 years ago. But yeah, I think they're missing the trick. I think all those religious people are missing a trick. I think it's also, sorry, one last bit, I think it's to do with, this a hangover to a previous understanding about what knowledge was and belief was. Because there must have been a time, well there certainly was a time, 500 years ago, before the scientific revolutions, when knowledge was much less certain than it is now, or not so much knowledge itself, but how you can be sure of anything. And authority about what constituted knowledge. You couldn't be vested in processes like it is now. The evidence was really a hard thing to understand. Seems trivial now, but all those kind of processes by which we gain empirical knowledge now weren't known about. So knowledge was vested in literal authority, in power authorities. If you were the boss, you got to say what the truth was, effectively. And you got to say what was literally true. So literal truth was really hard to come by, and was completely bound up with power, it seems to me. Which I guess is why, you have those kind of creedal statements in the Christian faith about what your statement of belief is. It isn't I have arrived at this belief by empirical processes. It's a testament of faith, and faith is a very, friable, fragile thing. And the fact that we here 500 years later are using a word like belief in the way that it's now used to refer to the literal truth of established by empirical kind of processes. Literally, the ark was literally there 4,000 years ago, just like this gorse bush is literally there. I think it's just a misapplication of what belief, faith, knowledge is really. And as I say, a gross misunderstanding of the power of the things that aren't true, the things that aren't literal. Big stories are better than true. That's the way we should look at it. That's exactly what I said to Mike. I said, look, the stories you got are potentially better than true. Why are you happy to stick with just true? He didn't get it. I don't know. Maybe you don't get it either. I get it. But